my greetings to all of you. First, let me thank Professor Nathu for giving this extraordinarily laudatory introduction. So, beginning with Professor Nathu, the Chairman Board of Governors, Professor Khare, the Director, the members of the board, and before I mention others, the three previous directors who have brought this institution to this enormously strong position, members of the Senate, and most importantly, all of you who are graduating today, as well as your proud parents. Let me first thank ISRK for giving me this opportunity to be present here and be part of this enormously young and youthful atmosphere, inspiring one in the bright future of India's science. First, of course, let me begin by congratulating all of you who will receive various degrees and will be stepping out in the world. Some of you will be academics, like most of us are here, the senior ones, I mean. Some of you will, explore applications of science for society, for many other interesting and enterprising roles. Some of you will trade the path of technology and contribute to the continual march towards India, which is a knowledge economy. Let me just wish, no matter which path you take, I hope that each of you moves onto a path that your heart desires and that you succeed in your chosen endeavor. But even more important than that, let me wish that you have fun doing what you do. Because, the journey is far more interesting than the destination. This is the 11th convocation of ISRK, and we have heard the reports of the wonderful progress that ISRK has done since its foundation in 2006. This was founded along with ISER in Pune with a mission and vision of creating research universities of the highest caliber which will integrate science, education, and research, with a hope that one can bring basic sciences in a better focus along with the career in technology, which has been very much in focus in India in IITs, let's say. I still remember participating in the very vigorous discussions. I think it was at NCL Pune, where I think Professor Nathu was also present in that discussion, and many of the learned members sitting in front here, where the stalwarts of Indian science actually pleaded the cause of such a, founding such research universities. And today it is wonderful to see that that is on its way to become a brand name, a reality. As was correctly said by Professor Nathu, 19 years is still too short a time to assess an institution's performance completely. But we can see that these institutes, something like ISRK, is already on its good way to becoming a brand name like the IITs are. And in fact, the students who finish their undergraduate studies at IISER will be soon populating the science, education and research institutes of India. And I really look forward to the day when we will talk about IISER K as well as IISER Pune as the original IISERs, just like we talk of the original 5 IITs. That's my hope for IISERs. IISER K is particularly close to my heart because the number of students whom one has engaged with while they were in IISc and who are now in IISER K performing various important functions as well as conducting excellent research, it really is, one really feels like a proud parent. Actually, I should tell you that I did not attend a single convocation of mine. So, I was always a bit worried as to what should I tell you guys, because I don't know what people told in my convocation. What should I wanted to put myself in your position. I couldn't. So I decided that, I will talk about, and also second thing is all of you belong to different areas of science. So I didn't really particularly want to talk about some aspects of science. So I decided that I will choose to talk to you about something that is science related, but which will also have relevance to all of you who may not even choose a life in science. I would specifically like to talk about why is it important to have equity and inclusion in science? And what is it that we as scientists, as institutions, and as society do to make sure that it's a reality? I can already see some question marks somewhere. Science is fact-based, data-based. We can understand that in social studies, social sciences, equity and inclusion considerations become important. Why should in science considerations of equity and inclusion be important at all? A fair question, and I hope to be able to answer that question. So, since most of us here are scientists or related to scientists, budding scientists, let me begin by defining words which I have already used. What is meant, I used 2 words, I said equity and inclusion. I also meant to say, which I forgot, is that to achieve equity and inclusion, we need to have diversity among the participants and processes of science. Now, you can ask, what is meant by diversity? Diversity simply means participation of different diverse groups in processes of science. And these groups can be based on caste, race, gender, or knowledge systems. I can keep on geographical region, I can keep on listing them. And one would think that since none of the attributes necessary to be a good scientist depend on which of these groups you belong to, you would imagine that the participation in science of all the groups will be equitable. But a simple cursory look at any of the educational institutions and whatever you have will make you realize that our scientific ecosystem is far from being diverse. And it is, this diversity that actually fuels a blooming of science. Again, this begs a question which again very often I have been asked, and therefore I am asking that question and answering it. Does diversity necessarily add to the excellence of science and technology? Actually, it's kind of very clear when we think a little bit, that any creative activity always benefits by as many layers and angles of thinking that you bring to the subject. And so it's clear that since no two human beings think alike, more minds come to contribute a particular ecosystem, the more different angles, the more different dimensions of this multidimensional enterprise will bloom up. And it sort of stands to reason that if you want to run a successful enterprise, you better use all your capital that you have kept in your safe. Keeping it locked up in the safe doesn't really make sense. These are all sort of very esoteric arguments. Why should we say that diversity adds to the multidimensionality of the science? But it's not just words. There has been social science research which actually proves that more diverse groups think more out of the box. This was in some social science context, but it was clearly demonstrated at all levels of standard deviations that we scientists are used to, with very high degree of confidence. It was actually established that diverse groups are less conformist, and therefore they are more willing to go against the status quo if that leads to a better outcome. And thinking out of the box is perhaps the best way science jumps. I rest my case that the diversity can only add to the excellence in science. Of course, you can say that humankind has made enormous progress. For me, since I'm a physicist, I say since Newton's time. A chemist will say since Avogadro's time or what have you. But since that time, the development of science, our understanding of nature's mysteries, has in fact progressed, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but dominantly through the efforts of white Caucasian males. So you would say, so what's wrong? Science has progressed in 300 years by leaps and bounds. So what difference did it make if we didn't have diversity in the participation? You also would say science is objective, science is universal truths, and therefore, whatever name or whosoever was the inventor, Newton's law would always be the same. The m mass times acceleration is equal to force. So what difference should it make whether there is no participation from different social groups? The reason for that, apart from the results of this social science research that I gave you, is also that issues in science that we choose to investigate actually are affected by our backgrounds, not just by our training, but by our bringing up, by our social constructs that we believe in. One example I want to give you is Anandibai Joshi, the first Indian woman doctor who did her doctorate, medical doctor degree in US. She chose to work on gynecological problems of Hindu women as the title of the thesis goes. And why? Because this poor woman at the age of 14 had lost her first child in the childbirth. Because they could not be treated by male gynecologists. This is a simple example. Or other much better and much more recent example, it is our Shalini Arya of ICT. She worked on this nutritious chapatis that was affected by her childhood, which she had to undergo lots of difficulties. So I would like to actually take an approach and say, can I give you an example where the bias actually kept some good research from happening or kept something back? And I found a very interesting example of a very famous mathematician called Sophie Germain. She was born around the French Revolution, 12 years before the French Revolution. And her interest in mathematics was, fueled by reading her father's books in the forced isolation after the revolution. They were all forced to live out of Paris, and she read those books in mathematics. Ecole Polytechnique was formed few years after that, and she wanted to join Ecole Polytechnique, but no, girls cannot join Ecole Polytechnique. Good girls do not study mathematics. So she studied under a pseudonym called Monsieur Leblanc and took the notes of her cousin. But the brilliance of her answers actually revealed, people wanted to talk to Monsieur Leblanc, and then people like Laplace, people like Gauss, actually were totally surprised to see this young slip of a girl doing this fantastic, showing the evidence of a fantastic mathematical intuition. But because she lost a lot of formal training in mathematics, eventually she did very important work in number theory. There are something called German numbers. Some of her work actually holds the seeds of the proof of Fermat's last theorem. In fact, what happened was, because of her lack of formal training, many of her papers would now be written back by Laplace or the journal Fourier, people like that, please, you need to develop this argument more exactly. What if this woman had studied mathematics from the beginning? For all I know, Fermat's theorem would have been solved 200 years ago. So this is, to me, an example how we can actually lose out because of the biases. And I will sort of want to end this discussion by a very simple and much more recent story. In animal behavior, nowadays it is recognized that female birds also sing courtship songs. This was something that was unknown about 25 years ago. And you would be not surprised, in fact, that most of the work on the female bird song as courtship songs has been done by women. So who we are seems to really directly, indirectly affect our research. And indeed, this is an example of diversity bringing extra dimensions to research. Examples I can also make of diverse knowledge systems such as Ayurveda. People like Professor Valyathan, Professor Asima Chatterjee, in fact, made very important contributions to the use of Indian medicine. And what is now the, sort of things such as success story of Google, which was the work of Dr. Satyavati, the first DG of ICMR, and the use of Sarpagandha in the development of medication against hypertension. This is all very well known. So the need of the time is to approach those old knowledge systems, not to copy them blindly, but validate their results with the present scientific knowledge and then take those developments further. Last but not the least, in the present day of AI being the tool for everything, I want to give a very interesting example. A statement made by Dr. Joy Bulwamini, who was the chief of media lab at MIT. And she noticed, this was a few years back, that the face recognition programs that they were building didn't work on African women 35% of the time, whereas they were completely fine for 95% of the white Caucasian males. In these days, when we are using AI, we are hoping to be using AI for all purposes, it's clear that diversity has to be there, not just in our subjects, but among the people who are exploring these things. So, so this is what's happening. Now, how do you change this? It makes pragmatic sense to have diversity in science. How do you change it? To change it, you must find out the reasons. And this is too short a time for me to analyze those reasons. But I want to just summarize in one line that there are two things I would like to share with you. Indeed, we need to bring more diversity. Indeed, we need to bring more numbers from the other groups. But bringing the numbers up to date is only a step. It does not cure the problem. It perhaps cures the symptom. And when we want to address this problem, we need to think of solutions which will look at the possible reasons. And in the next 3 minutes, I would like to kind of talk about one issue which I think is one of the most important cause for this underrepresentation. And that, what I call, is an unconscious bias, an unseen bias. I thought it is not a bias that one explicitly puts into word, it just seems to happen. These are the biases about our conception of what a member of a particular group can do or cannot do. What a member of a particular group should do or should not do. You know, I made a joke about surgeons being always males. You know, we all have heard it since our school days. Tell me the story that there was an accident and the person said, you know, I cannot operate because the person, patient is my child, and what is the solution? And people were stumped because they couldn't think that the mother could be the surgeon. I'm sure all of us have heard that joke. Very recently, actually some time back, a friend's daughter, we gave her a book called Joy of Toy Making, Indian Toy Making. And she made only half of the toys, very enterprising girl. So I asked her, why did you not make the other half? She said, no, but they showed only boys making those toys. So I decided they were not for me. Now this is the invisible impact that things have on your thinking. And this is the thing that these kinds of invisible biases is what we need to understand and then appreciate how to remove them. In fact, the survey that was mentioned in my introduction, which we had done, called Why Do Trained Scientific Women Power? Loss of Trained Scientific Women Power and Why? And we asked them, you know, people who have spent 8 years of their life doing a PhD, doing great postdoctoral research, and then giving up. So we asked them, why do you give up? Of course, there are many reasons. But one of the reasons people mentioned was the biases they felt in trying to make their career work consistent with their family responsibilities and find a job that was consistent with their training. So this happens very often. Invisible biases play a lot of role. I will actually tell you, gender is, I talked about gender because that's the comes to my mind. But this is not just gender. Think about how often we don't listen to a person carefully because the person doesn't speak very good English. That's the lingua franca of Indian science. How often we do not pay attention in a seminar to a person who is talking because he or she comes from not so famous institute, has not worked with not so famous scientists. So this is something we can correct for. How often we treat people who come from rural backgrounds with a bit of disdain till they prove to us that we from the urban areas don't hold the, the standard of scientific understanding. So actually, I would like to make a request to all of you, and particularly my young friends, as you go on in your life forward, both in and out of science, pay attention to the words that are being said to you. Don't be affected by the color of the messenger, the language of the messenger, or the geographical status of that messenger, or for that matter, even the physical status. So I think the first step is to be aware of our own internal biases, our own negative biases, to introspect and autocorrect. This is necessary, but it is far from sufficient. We will need help from policies. And even that policy making has to be made with keeping in mind that it is not affected by these invisible biases. Again, in a talk, I can actually talk about how this has to be avoided. So, again, all I want to say is that going forward, please introspect and autocorrect, all of us, for our invisible biases in our professional and personal lives. Beware of it when you treat your spouse. how you treat your children, irrespective of which gender they are. All of us, the individuals, scientists, science administrators, institute leaders, and society at large, all of us have to keep it in our minds, and I'm very sure that the day is not very far when India achieves the aim of being a fully inclusive scientific society. Thank you very much.